Welcome to another episode of Best of Trek, Worst of Trek, the show where I rank every live-action episode of the Star Trek franchise. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Making duplicates at 424? Class Y copies. Or Demon. This is one of the cases of my current ranking system breaking down. I've watched the entire franchise once and ranked it, but as I do second watches to do notes, I move things around. Generally only by a little bit, but this one was about 100 ahead of where we are now, and it honestly probably belongs 100 below this. I gave it too much credit for being the setup for the Great Course Oblivion. I will correct this in the next re-ranks and retrospectives video. Voyager is running out of deuterium and limping along on 1/4 impulse. We're introduced to the idea of a class-wide demon planet, where their last hope is to set the ship down and mine in the most inhospitable environment to human life. Harry must suffer a breach of his EV suit and drags his good buddy Tom down with him. Seven and Chakotay find the two sans suits in a seeming impossibility. Turns out they're clones made from a semi-sentient form of deuterium, but they can only survive on this planet. In exchange for letting them lift off, the stuff copies the whole crew and the ship. At face value, this sounds like an okay episode of TV. The problem is, it's held together by a string of bad puns and jokes. There's a B-plot about Neelix being at his most annoying since Kes left the ship, and the only thing that's actually worth watching is Duplicate Kim's speech to Janeway about the meaning and rights of life toward the end. This is a gigantic filler sandwich that sets up a much better episode. Making a collect call at 423, Crank Prank Time Phone, or Eye of the Needle. This is the first of many times the crew engages in a zany yet failed attempt to get off the island when they encounter a micro wormhole. By some miracle, it ends in the Alpha Quadrant, but in Romulan space. With the help of a micro probe, they're able to get in contact with a Romulan science ship. Just when they're ready to maybe be taken Romulan prisoners rather than spend 7 decades in the Delta Quadrant, the catch is, they're talking to a Romulan from 20 years in the past. For a mediocre first season, this is one of the better premises, but it's also the absolute slowest paced. The second plot about humanizing the Doctor is a nice step in the right direction for his journey, going from being Spock with a scalpel to emotion chip Data by the end of the run. Fighting fascism at 422, the Nth Reich, or Patterns of Force. Oh cool, more Nazis. This one's not the best or worst use of them in the franchise. In a show produced just 20 years after the defeat of Hitler in Europe, it was still fresh in the consciousness of viewers. Basically, Kirk gets hooked up with this Nazi Girl Scout leader to find a former Starfleet captain who decided all on his own, you know what this planet needs more of? Nazis. Didn't work on Earth, but there shouldn't be any unforeseen consequences, right? Including him being a literal drugged puppet of propaganda. The MacGyvering a laser out of a light bulb and a pair of salad tongs has never sat right with me. But I will say, the overall tone of this is actually done fairly tastefully. Playing a dictator at 421, let them eat war. Or Warlord. To me, this might be the most Jen Lean got to act in her time on Voyager. We're dropped into possibly the weirdest first frame in all of Star Trek. Neelix is getting a foot rub, and it looks like his version of Umox. A now deposed warlord puts his consciousness inside Kes before his body dies. The episode revolves around her taking back the throne, all the while Kes fighting the other consciousness. Janeway in the end gets involved in an internal struggle and storms the palace to save Kes. Not the best script, but it's executed on a high level. Recurring Trek director David Livingston turned this lower-ranked script to a solidly watchable hour of television that gave one of the most underwritten characters across Trek something decent to do on her last full season with the show. Not living up to parental expectations is number 420. Stop, collaborate, and listen. Or Sons and Daughters. For me, this is the worst of the 6-episode arc of the Dominion controlling DS9. It's not bad, it's just not as great as the other 5 episodes. I'm not the biggest fan of this annoying version of Warrior Alexander that spent his life saying he didn't want to do all the Klingon stuff, and then to piss off his dad, he joins the Klingon Defense Force. For some reason. It's mainly focused on a ship commanded by Martok and Worf on a series of misadventures before building camaraderie in battle. I find it really interesting that the Bajorans protested the Federation giving the Cardassians 5 industrial replicators, and now with their non-aggression treaty, the Dominion gives them 15. They really got the Cardassian production capacity up in a hurry to make such a generous offer. The best part is when Kira realizes she's become the collaborator that she would have killed back in her Resistance days. Trying to get a little suckle at 419? Salt Vampire. Or the Man Trap. There's a reason that after 2 pilots, this was the very first episode of Star Trek to ever air. It's a humanized plot without a ton of technobabble. Even though Kirk would be the captain with a lady in every port, Bones gets to visit with an old girlfriend married to a Federation scientist on an extremely desolate planet. Turns out she's actually a salt vampire who killed the original Nancy and took her form in exchange for salt. Even when offered a way off the planet, the scientist is a nutjob and chooses to side with the salt creature masquerading as his wife. We're introduced with the long-running Saurian Brandy. Sulu's Arboretum is pretty cool and feels like the inspiration for Saru's quarters on Discovery. The first red shirt of the series is blue, and it shouldn't have taken 6 deaths before they figure this out. Spock has a hilarious fight scene with Nancy, and the scientist keeps calling her with salt like a horse or a dog. Bidding for a chance at happiness at 418? The little things. Or in the cards. This is one of those episodes that's great to put on in the background while you're doing something else. It's entertaining and is the calm before the storm that would be the next episode of DS9. It's a lot of fun, but is literally all filler. It just highlights how much happiness you can bring to people's lives by just doing little things. We've got the best of the Old West in Trek. At 417, Old West Prejudice. Or North Star. This would have been an even better episode if it wasn't smack dab in the middle of the Xindi story arc, in the first chronological use of the human colony we didn't expect to find trope. Archer and company find people brought here hundreds of years ago and rose up against their overlords. There's some really nice exploration of the treatment of the remaining Skagarans. This is bedrock Star Trek. Fight the battles of the oppressed. After a phase pistol shootout at the OK Corral, Archer promises to have ships come back for them someday, and leaves them with some reading material. I generally like the overall tone of this one. Creating misdirection at 416. Time grift. Or A Matter of Time. Here's a classic but ultimately mediocre entry to the franchise. When a 22nd century inventor posing as a 26th century time traveler shows up, he almost creates a time paradox taking stolen objects from the D and pretend to invent it 2 centuries earlier. The whole episode is a comedic game of what if. The episode tied with another TNG episode, Conundrum, receiving an Emmy for visual effects that year. This guy was almost played by Robin Williams, which would have been incredible. You can tell the role was written with him in mind. He's playful, and Williams would have changed half the script. Doesn't feel like we've ever seen another character like this in Trek. Or like Robin Williams, one of the greatest late actors of all time. Closing out the block today at number 415, Robo Baby. Or Prototype. I really like the intro being this android's black and white damaged vision being found and beamed on board Voyager. In one of the oldest sci-fi tropes there is, the bot they beamed on board is one of many dedicated to wiping out the other side, which is also a race of robots that have wiped out their creators and are still at war. They steal B'Elanna and force her to create a prototype new android so they can in essence procreate. It's an okay B'Elanna episode. At one point, Chakotay says, "I'd hate to lose another shuttle." Pot, meet kettle.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Majel. Majel, Majel. Thanks, Majel. Majel, Majel.
KSM This is in Transporter Room 1.
Thanks, Majel.
An environmental seal has been compromised.
Majel.
Force field established.
Thanks, Majel.
Containment field established.
Thanks, Majel.
Hurting is a sweet sorrow, a chance to grow.